That morning, I checked my account. It was empty. My son called and said, "Dad, my wedding is tomorrow. I withdrew all the money from your account and sold the house. Good luck." I said nothing and made a phone call. When the wedding day arrived, at 1:12 in the morning, 10 hours before my son's wedding, I sat in a 2014 Buick LaCrosse in the back lot of an extended stay America off the LBJ freeway and watched the bride climb into a black Ram 2500 with Colorado plates. She was still in the white satin robe with bride stitched across the shoulders in gold thread, bare feet, heels hooked on 2 fingers. She crossed 40 feet of wet asphalt at a run, laughing, and the man in the driver's seat leaned across and opened the door before she got there, the way you only do for someone you've opened a door for 1,000 times. He kissed her, not a hello kiss, a tired one, the kind married people give each other at the end of a long day. I had a refurbished Canon PowerShot on the passenger seat, bought for $312 4 years ago to photograph hail damage on a roof. I braced my elbow on the window frame and took 11 pictures. Plate, faces, my own dash clock in the last frame, 1:14 a.m. Here's the part that told me what I'd become in 18 hours. My hands weren't shaking. 30 years in compliance, and I can tell you the exact moment a man stops being a victim and starts being a problem. It isn't when he gets angry. Anger is loud and useless and burns off like alcohol. It's the moment he gets organized. I'd crossed that line around 10 the night before, in a law office on Cedar Springs, with a $100 bill still in my breast pocket, and a folder in front of me that I'd built 11 months earlier for a reason I'd been too proud to say out loud even to myself. Let me tell you about Plan B. Martin Kessler has practiced elder law in Dallas for 28 years. He keeps a photograph on his desk of a woman named Eloise Trantham, 91, whose grandson moved her into a garage in Mesquite and lived in her house for 2 years while cashing her Social Security. He lost that case on a technicality in 2011 and keeps the picture where he has to look at it. He met me at his office at 9:40 that Friday night in a Texas A&M sweatshirt with a mustard stain on it. Plan B wasn't a trick. There is no magic word. Money that leaves your account is gone the way water is gone. It was paperwork. 11 months earlier, 4 days after discharge, I did what any compliance officer with a functioning brain does after a medical event. I papered my own life. I'd spent 3 decades reading the wreckage of people who didn't. Martin and I executed a revocation of the temporary durable power of attorney my son held during my hospitalization, signed, notarized, and crucially, recorded with the Dallas County Clerk, which almost nobody does, because almost nobody thinks they'll need to prove a negative. Copies went certified mail to my bank, my brokerage, and the title company holding the file on my house. Green cards. I still have them in a plastic sleeve. Then Martin made me an appointment with Dr. Amrita Venkataraman, a neurologist at Baylor Scott & White with 16 years in stroke medicine, who ran a full cognitive battery on a Tuesday afternoon in a room that smelled like hand sanitizer and burnt coffee. Montreal Cognitive Assessment. I scored 29 out of 30. I lost my point on delayed recall. I forgot the word velvet. Her note reads, "Patient demonstrates full decisional capacity. No evidence of cognitive impairment. Recommend no restriction on financial or legal autonomy." I laughed about it in the car. I thought it was overkill. Derek drove me to that appointment and sat in the waiting room the whole time on his phone. On the way home, he asked what the test was for, and I said, "So nobody can ever say I didn't know what I was doing." He said, "Smart." He said it like a man taking notes. Martin read the folder for 6 minutes without saying a word. Then he took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Victor, you understand what you have here. I have a son who's about to be married. You have a federal case." I said, "I'd rather have a son." He didn't answer that, which I appreciated, because the honest answer was that I couldn't have both, and we both knew it. Martin drafted the affidavit. I built the timeline, 1 row per event, columns for date, time, instrument, source document, custodian. I've built 400 of them for regulators. It's a boring skill. It has ended more careers than any speech ever given. And at 10:47 p.m., while Martin was on the phone with the after-hours fraud desk at my bank, I opened the Dallas County Clerk's public records portal and typed in my own address. "Seeing your house, the one with the mark on the kitchen door frame where Diana tracked Derek's height in pencil until he was 14 and got embarrassed, reduced to an instrument number. Special warranty deed. Instrument number 2026-0418-772. Recorded Tuesday, 9:03 a.m. Grantor, Victor A. Gallagher, by and through his attorney-in-fact, Derek A. Gallagher. Grantee, Halewood Legacy Holdings, LLC. Consideration, $612,000. The Dallas Central Appraisal District had the property at $1,040,000. They sold my house for 59 cents on the dollar. I told myself there was an explanation. I said it out loud, which is embarrassing to admit. Maybe he panicked. Maybe he took the first cash offer because he needed it fast. I wanted that to be true so badly my chest hurt. A stupid, desperate son I could survive. Then I looked at the dates again. Deed recorded Tuesday, 9:03 a.m. Wire out Thursday, 8:14 a.m. 2 days apart. 2 separate takings. Nobody panics twice, 47 hours apart, at 9 in the morning with a notary present. That's not panic. That's a schedule. And here's what turned my stomach over, because I know how these things move. If the house sold for $612,000 on Tuesday, then $612,000 in certified funds landed somewhere on Tuesday, not in my account. My account held exactly $485,113.40 Tuesday night and $1,340 Friday morning. So the house money never touched me at all, which meant somebody had given Derek wiring instructions before the closing, which meant Derek didn't invent any of this. Somebody taught him. Martin, I said. Who's Halewood? He was already typing. Halewood Legacy Holdings, LLC, organized in Delaware on June 2nd, 9 weeks before my house sold. Registered agent, one of those Wilmington mail drop outfits that services 80,000 entities out of a single suite number. Governing person, Curtis D. Hale. Mailing address, a UPS store in Frisco. An LLC that was 9 weeks old had bought my house. Martin printed the filing and something snagged. I'd heard that name Friday night. Somebody had introduced somebody as Kurt from the bride's side. Big man, mid-40s, good watch, forearms like a man who used to work outside and now pays a gym to remind him. He'd held my hand a beat too long and said, "So you're the dad." Hurt a lot. I'd thought it was politeness. It was inventory. We found the notary at 11:36 p.m. Both instruments, the special warranty deed and the power of attorney Derek had waved in my face like a charity donation, carried the same notarial certificate. Cheryl D. Dunmore, Notary Public, State of Texas, Commission number 1309426. The Texas Secretary of State runs a free public search on notary commissions. It takes 11 seconds. Commission expired September 14th of the prior year, 11 months dead. Martin made a small sound in his throat like a man who has just found a hairline crack in a dam. That's it, he said. That's the whole thing. Because a notarization is a chain of custody event, a sworn public officer certifying that a specific human being appeared before her on a specific date and signed a specific document. Take that away, and the deed isn't a bad deal. It's an unacknowledged instrument, void as to recording. And the power of attorney my son used to move $500,000 across a state line isn't a legal instrument at all. It's a piece of paper somebody printed. Then the second thing, the one that dried out my mouth. I know my own hand. I write my sevens with a bar through them, a habit from correspondent work with a Zurich desk in the 90s, and it never wore off. The 7 in that altered date had no bar. Somebody had traced my signature onto a new date and stamped it with a seal that hadn't been valid since September. That's forgery. That's aggravated identity theft under 18 U.S.C. Beton 28A, a mandatory 2 years on top of. Whatever else you get, consecutive, judge can't touch it. My son had put his own signature, the real one, loopy and hurried, on the grantor line of a fraudulent deed, on a wire authorization, and on a closing statement. Brooke Lanier's name appeared on nothing. I checked twice, then a third time. Not the deed, not the LLC, not the wire, not the closing disclosure, not one page in the entire file. I sat there at 11:52 at night and felt the floor go out from under something I'd been holding without knowing it. The idea that my son was the worst person in this story. He wasn't the architect, he was the paperwork. Every criminal act in the chain ran through Derek Gallagher's hand. If it blew up, exactly one person was holding the bag, and in 11 hours he was going to marry the woman who handed it to him. Martin asked if I was all right. I said I needed a minute. I stood in the hallway with both hands flat against the wall, and for about 90 seconds I was not a compliance officer. I was a father in a hallway. Then I went back in and asked Martin to pull every property transfer in Dallas, Tarrant, and Ellis counties for the last 36 months where the grantee entity shared a registered agent with Halewood. He said it was a needle in a haystack. It took 19 minutes. 4 hits. A house in Waxahachie, appraised $340,000, sold for $198,000 by an 80-year-old widower through his attorney-in-fact, his grandson. A duplex in Oak Cliff, $410,000 appraised, sold for $255,000, signed by a son-in-law. A ranch outside Midlothian, same structure, same discount. The 4th was mine. Everyone carried a Cheryl D. Dunmore notarization. Everyone closed at a small, independent title outfit. Everyone involved an elderly person whose child or grandchild had been handed a power of attorney during a medical crisis. Every single one sold within 60 days of a wedding or an engagement party. I have looked at a lot of fraud in my life, and never once been afraid of a pattern. It's just math with intent behind it. I was afraid of this one because it wasn't a scheme. It was a business. It had a production cycle, and my wife's shelter money was inventory. I called Lorraine Beckwith at 12:04 a.m., which is a rude hour to call a 78-year-old woman. Her number was on a small claims filing from the Ellis County docket. She answered on the second ring. Old people don't sleep. Ma'am, my name is Victor Gallagher, and I think the same people took my house that took yours. Long silence. Then, in a completely flat voice, is she calling herself Brianna? I sat down on the edge of Martin's desk. Brooke, I said. Brianna Vale when she was with my grandson. Pretty, very pretty. Laughs at everything you say. Asks about your late wife the second time she meets you, so she knows what to be sad about later. I couldn't say anything. There's a man too, big fella. Came to the engagement barbecue. Said he was in commercial real estate. Said he'd handle everything so I didn't have to worry. Kurt, she said. He called himself Kurt. 11 months. $41,000 in legal fees. Nothing back. Her grandson pled to a state felony and drives a forklift in Ennis now and doesn't come to Thanksgiving. The woman was gone inside 6 weeks. Phone dead, apartment empty, a name that belonged to a real woman in Lubbock who'd never heard of any of it. Then she said the thing I keep hearing at odd hours. They don't steal your house, hun. They steal your kid, and the house just falls out. I asked if she'd talk to a detective. I've been waiting 2 years for somebody to ask me that. I did one more thing before that parking lot, and it's the thing I'm least able to explain. At 12:31 a.m., I called my son, not to threaten him. I had a folder that could put... I did one more thing before that parking lot, and it's the thing I'm least able to explain. At 12:31 a.m., I called my son, not to threaten him. I had a folder that could put him in a federal courtroom, and I did not call to say so. I called because I'd finally understood that he was standing in the middle of a road with his eyes closed. And whatever else he'd done to me, I had held that kid's head up in a hospital bathroom when he was 19, and he swore he'd never drink like that again, and he hadn't. And I'd been proud of him for 12 years. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted him, Derek, nothing about the money. Do not sign anything else tomorrow. Not the license, not a joint account, not a post-nup. Call me and I will not say one word about what you took. I swear on your mother. 3 dots appeared, went away, appeared again. At 12:38, he wrote back, take the hint, old man. 5 words. No punctuation. Then, 20 seconds later, a second message my son did not write because Derek has never used a semicolon in his life. Any further contact will be documented and forwarded to counsel. You have been advised. She was holding his phone. That's when I stopped trying to save him from the outside. The extended stay was a guess. And barely that. The wedding party had blocked rooms at a Marriott in Las Colinas, but a woman who'd been 3 different people in 3 counties does not sleep where the guest list can find her. There were 4 extended stay properties within 12 minutes of that Marriott. The second one I drove past had a black Ram 2500 with Colorado plates backed into a space at the rear of the lot, nose out, the way you park when you might need to leave fast. I parked 11 spaces down with my engine off and waited an hour and 6 minutes. She came out at 1:12. He kissed her at 1:13. They sat in that truck with the dome light on for 9 minutes, and she was laughing. And at one point she put her feet on the dashboard the way a woman does in a vehicle she considers hers. Then they turned south, and I did not follow, because I am 71, and I know exactly what I am not built for. I drove back to the Days Inn on Northwest Highway, where I'd taken a room for $71, because my own house had a stranger's lockbox on it. I sat on the end of the bed with my shoes on. 2:04 a.m., I laid it all out on that polyester bedspread. Certified mail receipts, the recorded revocation, Dr. Venkataraman's note with 2930 Sai circled, the deed, the LLC filing, the dead notary commission, 4 counties worth of the same crime wearing different clothes, 11 photographs on a camera card, and the recording, 1 minute, 42 seconds, everything I needed. Then I did the math that nearly broke me, because this is where I stopped being a man building a case and became a man making a choice. If I moved before the ceremony, called Martin at 6, walked into a police station at 7, Derek gets served or arrested or simply spooked, and Brooke Lanier, whose name is on nothing, who has no legal relationship to me or my son or any instrument in that file, walks out of a hotel in Las Colinas and is somebody else by Tuesday, same as Lorraine's Brianna. The money had already moved. The house was already gone. An early strike bought me the small, mean satisfaction of ruining a party and the very large cost of letting her go. But if I waited, if I let it happen, then at some point that morning, in a county office with a clerk's seal, Brooke Lanier was going to have to do the one thing she had never done in any of the 4 transactions Martin pulled. She was going to have to sign her real name. A Texas marriage license application is a sworn document. Both parties appear, both present government identification, both swear under penalty of perjury to their full legal name, date of birth, and social security number. It gets filed with the county clerk. It becomes public record. 4 counties, 36 months, over $1 million, and the woman had never once put a pen to a document with her own identity on it, except to get married. That's the seam. That's the only seam. And the price of it was my son standing in front of 300 people in a suit paid for with his mother's life insurance, marrying a professional. I sat on that bed until 3:20 with a phone in my hand. I'd like to tell you I agonized, that I wept, that I prayed, that I had some dark night of the soul. What I actually did was make a list of pros and cons on Days Inn stationery, because that is who I am, and it is why I am telling you this story instead of living in an apartment in Mesquite eating off a hot plate. The pro column had 4 items. The con column had 1. His name was Derek. At 3:22, I called Martin and told him what I was going to do. He was quiet a long time. Then, Victor, I'll say this out loud so it's said. You are electing to let a felony proceed to completion in order to improve an evidentiary position. No, I'm electing to let my son find out who he married in front of witnesses. That's the same sentence. I know. At 6:15 a.m., I called the Dallas Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit and asked for whoever was working weekends. Detective Yolanda Price called me back at 6:41. 22 years on the force, the last 9 in financial crimes, a voice like a woman who has been lied to professionally for 2 decades and stopped being surprised by it. She let me talk for 4 minutes without interrupting, which almost nobody does. Then she said, "Sir, how much of this do you have in writing?" "All of it." "Say that again slower." I said, "Recorded revocation with a file stamp. Certified mail receipts to 3 institutions, a neurologist capacity assessment 4 days post-discharge, a recorded deed with a facially defective acknowledgement, a notary commission that expired 11 months before the acknowledgement date, a Delaware LLC formed 9 weeks pre-closing, sharing a registered agent with 3 other grantee entities, 4 grantors over 75, a prior victim willing to give a statement, time-stamped photographs of the bride kissing the buyer at 1:13 this morning, and a 1-minute 42-second recording of the attorney-in-fact admitting the taking." A pause. "What did you do for a living, Mr. Gallagher?" "Bank compliance, 30 years. "Well," she said, "that explains the goddamn footnotes." She called back at 7:55 with a second voice on the line. Special Agent Ruben Alvarez, FBI Dallas Field Office, Complex Financial Crimes, 19 years, a man who talks in short sentences and leaves gaps where you're supposed to fill in the truth. The wire had gone from a Dallas institution through a correspondent in Delaware into a receiving account. Interstate, that's paragraph 1343, that's his. He asked 2 questions. First, was the receiving account still open? It was. Martin had gotten that out of the fraud desk at 11:14 the night before. $311,400 of the $485,000 was still sitting in it. The rest had gone out in 4 transfers under $10,000, and one of $148,000 to a title escrow in Tarrant County. Alvarez said, "Structuring the small ones. Sloppy." Second, "Where will these people physically be and when?" I said, "The Wexford estate in Preston Hollow. Ceremony at 11:30. Both of them. Plus 300 witnesses and a photographer under contract." "Say the photographer part again." "There's a videographer too. 2 cameras." There was a sound on the line I'm fairly sure was Special Agent Alvarez putting down a coffee cup. "Mr. Gallagher," he said, "do not do anything cinematic." I told him I wouldn't. I meant it when I said it. The morning went sideways at 9:20. Detective Price called to say a freeze on the receiving account required either a seizure warrant or the bank's voluntary hold, that an AUSA named Neil Kwan was being woken at home, and that the earliest realistic timeline for paper was mid-afternoon. Then she said the thing that put a fist in my chest. The receiving account had an outgoing transfer queued for 2:00 p.m. that same day. Same-day settlement. $305,000 to a broker in Scottsdale, Arizona. For a boat. $300,000 of my wife's shelter. On a boat. "Can you stop it?" "I can try," Price said. "I can't promise." Then the second clock, the one I'd been carrying since March, made itself known. Ruth Adeyemi called at 9:41. Ruth is 83. She ran the Cedar Crest Community Center for 31 years. The gym with the warped free throw line, the kitchen where Diana volunteered every other Saturday for 9 years, the back office where a 14-year-old named Diana Reyes slept on a cot for 11 nights in 1968 because her mother's boyfriend was in the house and the city had no bed for her. Diana told me about those 11 nights exactly twice in 43 years of marriage. The second time was in hospice, and it wasn't a story. It was an instruction. The city condemned the building in February. Ruth had a purchase agreement with me at $340,000 and a hard deadline. If it didn't close by October 2nd, the parcel went to public auction, and a developer called Prosper Ridge already had a site plan for 11 townhomes. Victor, Ruth said, the title company called. Your funds letter bounced back. I stood in a Days Inn parking lot in a suit I'd bought in 2019 and told an 83-year-old woman the money was gone. She was quiet a second. Is it gone or is it stolen? Because those are different. It's stolen. Then it's not gone yet, Ruth said. Go get it. I got to the Wexford estate at 10:52. Circular drive, valet stand, a lawn that costs more per month than my first mortgage, a string quartet warming up behind the hedges. An arch of white peonies and eucalyptus I later learned cost $8,400. Brooke had put me at table 19, back corner by the service door, next to a cousin I'd never met and the florist's mother. There was a place card with my name in gold calligraphy. She'd spelled it Victor. I put a black folder on the chair beside me and my suit jacket over it. I'd taken my blood pressure medication at 6 o'clock and eaten a sausage biscuit at 8:15, because I know what happens to a 71-year-old body under stress with no food in it, and I did not intend to be a man who fainted at his son's wedding. At 11:14, I saw Derek. He came through the side doors with his best man, adjusting his cuffs, and he was, and this is the part that still gets me at 3 in the morning, he was happy, not smug, happy. That stupid open look he used to get at the top of the stairs on Christmas morning. He hadn't slept. You could see it. He was glowing anyway. He scanned the room and found me. Everything went out of his face. He crouched next to my chair so nobody would see, and I could smell his cologne and under it sweat. What are you doing here? You invited me. Brooke invited you. For the photos. Then lower. Dad, please. Not today. I'll fix it. After the honeymoon, there's a plan. There's money coming. I'll fix it. And that's when I knew, all the way down, and it was worse than anything I'd found in a records portal. He believed it. He genuinely believed there was money coming. I looked at my son crouched by a folding chair at table 19, 39 years old, in a $2,900 rented tuxedo, and asked one question, nothing in my voice. What's her mother's name? He blinked. What? The woman in the blue dress at table 9. It's Diana, something. He laughed a little. One question, nothing in my voice. What's her mother's name? He blinked. What? The woman in the blue dress at table 9. It's Diana, something. He laughed a little. Why? Where'd Brooke grow up? Amarillo. He stood, rattled and covering it. Dad, I swear to God. Lorraine Beckwith's grandson had been told Lubbock. Okay, son. He stared at me. Something moved behind his eyes. That old animal instinct, the thing that makes a man's neck prickle in a parking garage. For about 2 seconds, my son was almost awake. Then a bridesmaid called his name, and the moment closed like a door. The ceremony started at 11:36. I've had people accuse me of enjoying it, so let me say it plainly. I did not enjoy 1 second. I watched my son marry a woman named Bridget Ann Marsh, 34, of Enid, Oklahoma, 6 aliases, an open bench warrant in Comanche County, though I didn't know that yet. I watched him cry during his vows. He said, I've never had anyone who chose me before, and half the room made that aw sound, and I put my thumbnail into my palm hard enough to leave a mark for 2 days. She said her vows in a clear, steady voice with perfect pauses and cried on exactly the right word, and I thought, she's done this before. Not the crying, the timing. They kissed at 11:52. 300 people stood up. At 11:58, seated again, I felt my phone buzz twice in my breast pocket, right next to a folded $100 bill. Detective Price. Hold is in. Bank froze it voluntarily at 11:44 pending warrant. 2 p.m. transfer will not execute. And then, 40 seconds later, Alvarez has the license. She signed it at 10:15. Real name confirmed. He's coming. I put the phone face down on the tablecloth. The reception moved into a tent off the west lawn, a raw bar, a 6-tier cake with sugar peonies matching the arch. Somebody's uncle got into the McAllen early and told me a long story about a boat he almost bought, and I nodded and thought about a boat in Scottsdale. At 12:19, Brooke found me. She was radiant. The woman was very good at her job. She crossed the tent with both hands out, took my forearm the way a daughter would, and said, loud enough for the people nearest us, Victor, I'm so glad you came. Then, without dropping the smile, quieter, mouth near my ear, you look better than last night. Eat something and get a car. You've had your photo. And then she did the thing that ended her. She turned to the room, still holding my arm, and said brightly, actually, We should hear from Derek's dad, before the toasts. Just something short, because she thought I was broken. She'd watched me shake in a study the night before and take her $100 bill and thank her for it. She thought she was staging a photograph. The humbled father blessing the couple. A little cruelty for dessert. She put a microphone in my hand. Somebody clinked a glass. 300 faces turned. 2 videographers, one on a gimbal by the cake, one static at the back, and a photographer named Marisol Ontiveros, who has since told me she moved to the front because of something about the way he held that folder. I hadn't planned a speech. I'd planned to sit at table 19 until Alvarez arrived and let professionals do the professional thing, but she put a microphone in my hand. Thank you. I'll be brief. I'm not a talker. Derek, your mother would have loved the flowers. She'd have hated the price. Warm laughter. Derek's face did something complicated. I want to thank the people who made today possible. That's the tradition, isn't it? So I'd like to thank the buyer of my house. 300 people arranged their faces into polite confusion. On Tuesday morning at 9:03, a company called Halewood Legacy Holdings, organized in Delaware 9 weeks ago, mailing address a UPS store in Frisco, recorded a deed to my home at $612,000. The county has it at $1,040,000. That's a discount of $428,000, which is, coincidentally, about what today cost. Somebody near the bar said, "What?" On Thursday morning at 8:14, $485,000 left my account by wire, under a power of attorney I revoked 11 months ago, and recorded with the county clerk. That money was my wife's life insurance. It was going to buy the Cedar Crest Community Center on Wilhurt Avenue and turn it into a shelter. Diana slept in that building for 11 nights when she was 14. She asked me for exactly one thing before she died. The tent had gone silent, the kind of silence with a floor to it. Both documents were notarized by Cheryl D. Dunmore, commission number 1309426. Her commission expired 11 months ago. Anyone can verify that in 11 seconds on the Secretary of State's website. I'd encourage you to. Several of you are lawyers. A man at table 6 took out his phone. The same expired stamp appears on 3 other deeds in this metroplex. A widower in Waxahachie, a couple in Oak Cliff, a ranch outside Midlothian, all over 75, all sold at roughly 60 cents on the dollar to a Delaware LLC, sharing a registered agent with Halewood, all signed by an adult child or grandchild holding a power of attorney, and every single one closed within 60 days of an engagement party. Brooke's hand was still on my arm. I felt it change. It didn't grip. It went slack and then lifted slightly, the way a hand does when a body is deciding which direction to run. I turned toward table 9 and kept my voice flat. The governing person of Halewood Legacy Holdings is a man named Curtis D. Hale. He's here. Table 9, next to the woman we've all been told is the bride's mother. Every head in that tent turned at once. It made a sound like wind. "Kurt, stand up and say hello." He was already standing. He was already moving. He went for the gap between the bar and the tent wall at a dead run, 230 pounds, and took out a cocktail table and a tray of oysters on the way, and I watched him hit daylight at the tent's edge and stop. Just stop. Dead. Both hands going up on their own. Because Alvarez had come around the outside of the tent, and Detective Price had come up the service path from the kitchen, and there were 4 Dallas PD units on the circular drive, and one of the valets, God bless him, had already moved a van across the gate. They put Curtis Hale on the grass under a peony arch that cost $8,400. I turned back around. Bridget, was not next to me anymore. She had made it 11 feet toward the west lawn and stopped, because a uniformed officer was standing at the break in the hedge. She turned back, and I watched the mask come off in stages, and I'll never forget it because it didn't fall. It was removed, like a woman taking off earrings. The warmth went first, then the softness around the eyes, then her shoulders came down and squared, and she got about an inch taller. The last thing to go was the mouth, which stopped being a bride's mouth and became a flat, assessing, completely calm line. She looked at me across 30 feet of white linen and dying string music, and she smiled. A different smile, almost friendly. She said, and I heard it perfectly because the tent was silent, "Well, good for you." Then she looked at Derek and she said, "Don't say anything to them." And it wasn't tenderness, it was instruction, and my son heard the difference. I saw it hit him. I saw the exact second my son understood, because his knees actually gave a little and he caught himself on the back of a chair. Detective Price read Bridget Ann Marsh her rights next to a 6-tier cake. Derek didn't get arrested that day. That surprised people. He got walked out to a squad car by Agent Alvarez in a rented tuxedo, past his own reception, and sat in an interview room at the FBI's Dallas office for 6 hours with a boutonniere still pinned to his shirt. I know because I sat in that lobby for 5 of them. Martin came at 2, bought me a bag of pretzels from a vending machine, said, "Eat," and I ate them. Around 6:30, Alvarez came out and sat on the bench across from me. He's talking. Is he lying? Some. Less every hour. He rubbed his eyes. "Mr. Gallagher, I've done this 19 years. Your son is not a criminal. He's a mark who signed things. That is not a legal defense, and I want to be clear it isn't. He forged a date on an instrument. He knew it was wrong. He'll answer for it. But she worked him 14 months, peeled him off 3 friends, had him convinced you were declining and that he was managing your affairs responsibly, showed him a fabricated medical article on post-stroke financial impulsivity, had him convinced the 485 was going into a joint account that would return inside 90 days. He paused. There's a post-nuptial agreement drafted. He signs it Monday. It contains an acknowledgement that all prior transfers were made at his sole direction. So he takes the fall. He was always the fall, Alvarez said. The wedding wasn't the goal. The wedding was the receipt. Then I asked the only question I actually wanted answered. Did he know she was with Hale? Alvarez looked at the floor. No, he said. He found out at 12:22 this afternoon. From you, in front of 300 people. The consequences, because they're the only part of this that's arithmetic. Bridget Ann Marsh, 34, of Enid, Oklahoma, aliases Brooke Lanier, Brianna Vale, and 4 others, was indicted on 14 counts. Conspiracy, 7 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of aggravated identity theft, and 2 counts of false statement on a sworn instrument. That instrument was the Dallas County marriage license application she signed at 10:15 a.m. on her wedding day. The jury took 4 hours and 10 minutes. She's serving 168 months plus the mandatory 24 consecutive, 16 years. She never once looked at Derek in that courtroom, not during his testimony, not at sentencing. I watched for it. Curtis Dale Holland, 46, who'd been calling himself Curtis Hale since 2017, and had an Oklahoma prior for a nearly identical scheme, pled out at 121 months and forfeited 4 properties, a Ram 2500 and the boat he'd put a deposit on and never saw. Cheryl Dunmore, the notary, rented Holland her seal at $500 a document long after her commission lapsed. 17 documents, $8,500 total, 14 months and permanent debarment. Renata Cho, the escrow officer at the title company that closed all 4 deals, was not charged. She'd flagged the second one internally in writing, in a memo nobody read, Exhibit D at trial, and one of the things that hung Holland. She apologized to me in a hallway, and I told her she was the only person in that building who did her job. And Derek Gallagher, pled guilty to 1 state count of exploitation of an elderly individual and 1 federal count of false statement in a document filed with a government agency that traced date. 5 years probation, 400 hours of community service, restitution joint, and permanent revocation of the Texas broker's license he'd held for 9 years and was, until this, the thing he was proudest of. He wanted prison. He asked for it in his allocution. The Honorable Marguerite Feld, 26 years on that bench, told him prison was not a payment plan for his conscience, and that he could do the harder thing instead. I gave the prosecutor everything, including the recording, all 1 minute and 42 seconds of it. I also gave them the 14 months of text off his phone, 400 days of a woman he loved convincing him that his father's brain was dying and that he was the only one who could be trusted to act. Both. I gave them both. That's the closest thing to mercy I had in me. Of the $485,113.40, we recovered $311,400 from the frozen account, $92,000 in forfeiture, and $41,700 from the sale of a both. I gave them both. That's the closest thing to mercy I had in me. Of the $485,113.40, we recovered $311,400 from the frozen account, $92,000 in forfeiture, and $41,700 from the sale of a Ram $2,500 and a Rolex Datejust. The deed was voided 14 months later in a quiet title action on the grounds that an unacknowledged instrument executed under a revoked power of attorney conveys exactly nothing. Halewood did not appear to contest it. It's hard to appear when your governing person is in Beaumont. I got my house back on a Thursday in October and stood in the empty living room about 11 minutes. The pencil marks were still on the kitchen doorframe. Somebody had painted around them. I sold it 3 weeks later. Open market, real broker, $15,000. I didn't negotiate and didn't look back from the car. The mahogany table came back too. Martin tracked it to a consignment warehouse in Garland, and I bought my own table for $1,500 and didn't argue about that either. When it came off the truck, one of the movers said, "Sir, there's writing under the leaf." I got down on the floor, 71 years old, and looked up. Diana had written in ballpoint, In 1979, V. If you're reading this, you finally fixed the wobble. Took you long enough. Love, D. 47 years. I never once looked under the leaf. That's the only time in this whole thing I lost it. The Diana Gallagher house opened in March, in the old Cedar Crest Community Center on Wilhurt Avenue, 9 days before the auction deadline because Ruth Adeyemi is 83 and immovable and got the city to extend twice. 14 beds, emergency placement for kids 12 to 17, 2 full-time caseworkers, a kitchen with a working exhaust hood, and a gym where the free throw line is still warped because Ruth wouldn't let us fix it. She said the girls know that line. There's a plaque by the door with Diana's name on it, and under it the only thing I could think of that she actually said, in her actual voice, "Nobody sleeps in a car in my city." Inside the front office, behind the desk, there's a small black frame with a $100 bill in it. It's the one Brooke Lanier folded into my breast pocket at the rehearsal dinner and patted twice, like tipping a dog, so I could take a taxi and not ruin her photos. The card underneath says, "First donation. Every kid who comes through that door asks about it eventually." I tell them a woman once paid me $100 to disappear, and it's still the smallest offer I've ever taken seriously, and that it bought a building. Derek does his community service on Saturdays. 2 years now, about 400 hours past the 400 he owed. He mops the gym. He fixes the dryers. He drives kids to court dates in a 14-year-old Honda Accord with 190,000 miles on it. Last month, a 16-year-old named Alonzo asked what he did before this, and Derek said, "I sold houses," and left it there. He has never asked me to forgive him. That's the first honest thing he's done in 3 years, and I've decided it counts. We don't talk much. Same building most Saturdays, maybe 40 words, but in April, he replaced the pencil marks. He'd photographed that door frame the day the house sold. I don't know why, I've never asked, maybe some part of him knew even then, and transferred the heights to the millimeter onto the office door at the shelter, age 2 through 14, in her handwriting. Traced. He didn't tell me. I found it. I stood there a long time. People ask if I regret doing it in front of 300 people, whether I couldn't have pulled him aside, done it quietly, spared him that. Here's the thing. He'd have believed her. Alone with me in a room, my son would have believed his fiancée over his father, because that is exactly what he'd been trained for 14 months to do, and I would have lost him for good. She needed an audience to run that con, so I gave her one. Diana used to say that money finds its way home. She never said how much of you it takes with it.